Welcome to the Honest Psychologist podcast, where two licensed clinical psychologists have joined the chat. I'm Dr. Whitney Graff.
I'm Dr. Paige Hover. We bring our years of expertise to the conversations you're already having, breaking down the topics shaping culture, social media, and everyday life.
No psychobabble, just relatable discussions about how our minds work and why it matters. Okay.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Hello.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about...
Here, wait, I'll get the official. Okay, so this is an article in the New York Times by Paul Tough.
I think that's how you pronounce it, yeah.
It's spelled like tough. And it says at the very bottom, a version of this article appears in print on page 22 of the Sunday magazine with the headline, Rethinking ADHD. And when we looked at it, it has the headline, Have we been thinking about ADHD all wrong?
And at this point, I'm calling it like the infamous ADHD New York Times article because it has garnered quite a response. I don't know if it's like a nationwide across professions response, but I came across it on a Facebook group with, I think, 150 comments in response to it. And I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I should take a look at this. And since then, I don't know if it's my algorithm or what, but obviously I'm seeing a lot more people having reactions to it. But we've even had colleagues that have spoken to it specifically. It's garnering a lot of response. I think most of it is negative and panic.
I guess so. So we thought we kind of had to talk about it. But it's also what we want to talk about with each other all the time. So that's what this podcast is. We're going to turn the microphones on and the stuff we already say. So, yeah, I also became aware of it when a colleague said, ugh, did you see that article? And so I was definitely braced for like, what is this article going to say?
Right.
Apparently it says all kinds of terrible things.
And part of me, I was prepared for that because, like, it's not uncommon that, like, when psychology is mentioned in the media that sometimes they get it wrong or I have similar reactions to that. Like, ugh, that's terrible, or they didn't accurately portray it. So it obviously piqued my interest. But I think the reason you and I are talking about it today is our reactions are different than what it seems like the majority of our colleagues are having. And at least I know we're both having the moment where we're sitting back and going, looking around, being like, did we read the same article?
Yeah, it's been it's been dysregulating. I don't. It's been confusing.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there are some people who are mad without reading the article. I don't know who these people are, but I think some people get mad and they haven't read it because they're going based on what they think it says.
Yeah.
So we've each read it a couple of times through. And then I looked up a couple of the citations that are within this, just to, I think it's good in general to go try and see it with your own eyes.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, I don't know what it is about my personality, but especially when it's like a journalistic thing where they're going to take on a psychology topic, there's a part of me that loves it.
Oh yeah, say more.
I think that somebody who's a good investigative journalist can bring a perspective to our field that we can't.
For sure.
Like, we're too in it. Like, it's the water we swim in. We're too, I don't know, we get emotionally invested. We're professionally invested. I'm kind of here for it when somebody who is outside the profession, but still like somebody who's smart, somebody who knows how to read like data and evidence. Like there's a guy, we listen to his podcast, Derek Thompson, who's a journalist. He's got a podcast.
Oh, right.
And he interviewed this author, but he also did one on anxiety that I thought was excellent.
Okay.
So I'm kind of here for it because, I find that a lot of people in our field kind of cite the evidence, but haven't necessarily taken the time to really take a close look at it. And we are vulnerable to like, oh, I just know.
Mm-hmm.
Or we also have that supervisor effect of like, years ago, my supervisor told me this, and I really respected that supervisor, so that must be how it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we are inside, we're all, oh, maybe we'll talk more about this as we talk about the reaction here. Inside, we're all terrified little graduate students.
100%. Yeah, no, I think that that's like, we can talk about that now because I think that there's a lot of the reaction that I see commonly, like this kind of intense reaction I'm seeing among peers and among the profession is not uncommon. I think that when anybody asks a question or they're like, hey, I'm not sure, I mean, my experience a lot of times is that people just jump down your throat or there's a lot of judgment that's involved. And I think a lot of that comes from this like nervousness of like, wait, do I not know something? Wait, I thought I knew it that way. And there's just this like grad student pride that's like, no, I know what I'm talking about. And that may be an overgeneralization, but I don't think that this reaction is very different, but it's not helpful. We gotta stop judging each other.
Oh my God. Yeah. I think I had that on the list of like possible episodes for us. Like, why are psychologists so judgmental of other psychologists? But we all advertise ourselves as being non-judgmental because
Uh-huh.
we want people to come see us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're my client, I won't judge you. But if you're my colleague, you know, you are gonna
Harsh.
get my wrath sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, I think there's fear. I relate to the fear. Tell me if you relate to this. Um, it's because of all the cases that have come before the moment that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, relevant to this topic, there was an article back in 20. I remember where I was living. So it might have been around 2019. And it's one of the authors mentioned in this New York Times article. It's Russell Barkley,
Yep.
you know, who is huge in the field of ADHD.
Yep.
There's a lot to be said about Russell Barkley. He wrote an article for his own, basically his own journal, and then it's his own paywall. But eventually, I think I got a copy, and it was called Neuropsychological testing doesn't work for ADHD. Stop doing neuropsych testing for ADHD or prove that it works. And I remember having this very, very strong reaction because my supervisor had told me that it worked. And she had told me what tests to give, what to look for, and then I had based conclusions on that.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously doing that, like, this is the practice of, you know, psychology, the practice of medicine, the practice of whatever. Like, you're just doing the best you can for every person that comes through your door with the knowledge that you have, with the experience that you have. But hearing this doesn't work, I had like fight or flight.
Mm-hmm.
I freaked
Mm-hmm.
out. And I remember commenting, I think online, like, nah, 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 nah. And then I remember distinctly the walk I took afterwards because I was like dealing with my feelings.
For sure. No, you might have shown me that article too, but I remember that same moment of prove it. And I read through the article and like had some compelling evidence that matched my practice experience. There were many times that this formula that I was taught to use to diagnose ADHD wasn't working. And I was like, but wait, how do I make it work? And so there was a part that resonated, but that was what I built it on. That was what I told clients, right? Like, get neuropsych testing because of this. It was half of my marketing, plan of why would you invest money and time in doing this and why should you? And then there's this article from somebody who is very well known in the field telling, yeah, no, it doesn't work. And there was a part that resonated and I was like, oh no. Like the stomach drop moment where you're like, have I been doing it wrong this whole time?
Yep. Glass shatter.
Yeah.
Like, I felt the blood drain out of my face.
Yeah.
And, and then it's hard. Like, you have to overcome your own human reaction, which is defensiveness. Like, it's just normal, I think, in that situation to feel defensive and anxious and upset, maybe angry. And then to overcome that is really hard, to face the possible reaction that you've given wrong information
Yep.
to, your clients, that you've said something in public that turned out to not be based in something,
Yep.
and that maybe you'd drawn bad conclusions.
And I don't know if this is like that in all other professions, but I know for psychology, like, we've gotten it wrong in the past. And what were part of guidelines 20 years ago are now considered maybe sometimes harmful, or really inappropriate. And we've gone through that in our history. So I almost wish we could remember that, of like, hey, we don't always have it right. Like, we're trying to understand. And I think ADHD is one of those things, especially now, that is evolving, and we're doing our best to understand it at that time. But in 10 years, we're going to have to keep looking at this. We're going to have to check in. We're going to have to say, hey, does this still fit? Does this still match certain things? And I think that's a lot of what this article did, which was just kind of pose some questions like, hey, this is what, this research says, but what about this? And how do you reconcile that? And of course, it's easy to get defensive, but I really think it's part of our job to work through that defensiveness and then actually ask, like, okay, hey, that's a good point. Like, do we need to reevaluate? Do we need to rethink this? Rather than staying stuck in this position, I think that's not helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's just part of, like, when I think about myself as a practicing clinician, this is part of my values, and we do values work in therapy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's easy when, the thing you want to do also matches what your values say is the right thing to do. But what's hard is when, it doesn't, when it would be kind of easier to ignore something that doesn't fit with your knowledge and just reassure yourself, no, like, that must be wrong. I must be right.
Mm-hmm.
It's much harder to face the idea that you've had something wrong in your head. So like that article about the neuropsych testing was a game changer for me. I still offer some neuropsych testing, but I don't interpret things at all the same way as I used to. So I'm using it in a completely different context and different, like, aims now than I used to. It used to be so cut and dried in my head. You look at this score, you look at this score, you look at this score, you compare it to this, and that's your answer.
Yep.
And the idea that won't give you the answer, then, I mean, that kind of transitions us back to this latest article, which is really calling into question the idea of, like, do some people just have this different brain and will always? Do you just have ADHD? You have it now, you'll always have it. Your brain is different. I mean, I've had people say, like, and, my son's brain is broken. And I think, whoa, okay, maybe not. Like, that framing is a little fraught. I can see how people get there. But, do you just have this different brain and you always will? Or is the truth something muddier than that? And, and if you've been going along with the idea that this is a binary, you either have it or you don't, you always have it or you don't, this is an upsetting thing to consider. I think it could turn a lot of people's worlds upside down. And there seems to be some good data in this article.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask you what was the thing that you kept coming back to after you had read it? Like, the main takeaway that kind of stood out to you most?
That there is so much gray, that as much as we want it to be this black and white thing, it's so unique to each situation and each individual. And I think it's more encompassing, like, kind of talking about all the ways in which either it could be the full-on diagnosis or some symptoms. Like, I thought it was really encompassing, and that's why I think it was so shocking to see my colleagues' reactions saying that, oh, well, he said this didn't exist. Well, he's ignoring the research. What, like, kind of, I don't know. That's where I was like, did we read the same article? Because I thought this was actually really encompassing, and I think it really highlighted the gray, which I think is really hard to sit with. I mean, I talk about that with my clients all the time. There is a desire to have things be black and white, to be organized. We're human beings. We know that about ourselves. But in a lot of ways, I think it can be helpful to work through some of that discomfort that comes with the gray to really kind of understand it and kind of then like know what approach you have to take rather than this one size fits all medication, this type of treatment, or this. It's like, well, it could be a whole mix of both. So
yeah, when I read it back a second time, something different stood out to me. But the first time, what I was like chewing on going about my day-to-day life was this idea that when, let's say, a child is diagnosed and they're exhibiting symptoms, that they give it a little bit of time, they may drop below threshold. So there may be a period of time, years, this through that, where they're not meeting criteria anymore.
Yep.
And it's as if the disorder sort of quieted down, and then maybe it comes back in a different setting. And like that kind of symptom fluctuation, the idea, I think it was like only a small percentage, I'm remembering 11%, but I could double check that, had like full symptom criteria, were met and stayed met for a very long, like decades. That was the exception and not the norm.
Right.
Yeah. Does that, when you think about either people in your everyday life or like clients you've worked with, does that sound right?
100%.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think that that's where it's hard when we're prescribing a black and white kind of idea about it. I mean, I've seen people, because I did a lot of accommodations testing, that, they had the diagnosis at a young age and then they're going to college and they want to have these accommodations and the results doesn't support it, So I don't know how to tell you. I don't know if that diagnosis was incorrect before. I don't know if you've grown out of it. I don't know. Kind of too, what the article was saying is that sometimes it's like a match of context, like the context now matches, so you don't meet that criteria anymore. But it is very hard then to shift of like, okay, well, this is how I've kind of gone about my life. And it's shocking for them to hear. I always frame it as, I'm not saying you don't have it. I'm just saying, if I'm going to try to make a case to your college that you need accommodations based on these testing results, they're going to say no. And I can't make a case for it. I can try, but just be prepared. And that's a big shift. I also think, too, just about how kind of thinking about the context, right? Of just like, rather than seeing like your child's brain is broken, just being able to see like, hey, my child learns differently. And there may be certain times where they need a lot of support and there may be certain times where they don't. I think that really helps. I've heard people have more success that way when they can frame it as like, yeah, sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's not, but they're not saying, well, she has ADHD, so this is what it is and this is the thing. It's just, hey, they learn a little differently. And so I think, again, that's like the real world experience. I think that research presents one thing and then it's in practice. Like part of the reason we get to this, like when we learn about it, it has to be learned black and white, but then we practice it and it's not, like we have to learn it black and white so it like gets in our head and we need the formula at first. And then as time goes on, we start to get more comfortable sifting through the gray because that's what you're presented with.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the same time, I mean, psychology has been trying to find black and white, or it's been trying to find its place in medicine for a very long time.
So much. And we're not medicine. We're a science. We are, but we're not medicine.
Yeah. I mean, it's in a lot of ways, it's a social science. I think it was in the, 90s and the early O's, we were going to find the gene for this and the gene for that. This article talks a little bit about that too.
Yep.
We have not found the gene for ADHD. We never found the gene for like name a mental health. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
some of them are extremely heritable.
Oh, for sure.
Schizophrenia, more than half the variance, I believe, is explained by heritability.
Yeah.
I want to say bipolar. I just did some research on bipolar 1, and it's like, what is the biggest predictor? Heritable, like gene
Wow.
factors. Yeah.
I'd be so interested though. Like
But
this is
these, though, I only bring it up because that is the exception rather than the
yeah.
rule. If you have been told you have a depressive disorder, it's really so different than having a psychotic related disorder,
Right.
a bipolar spectrum disorder, where we just know so much more about how that's passed down through the gene pool and how it manifests in the brain. Whereas depression is such an amorphous, individualized experience that we spend all this time trying to make it into a disease. And then we just can't, because that's not what human psychology is. That never seems to work when you're dealing with people, like ideas like feeling good, feeling bad, being in love, being in grief, being,
Feeling worthless, feeling hopeless.
yeah, how you
Yeah.
think about yourself, how you think about other people. I'm sorry, I interrupted you before. What were you
Oh
going to
no,
say?
it was a sidebar that it wasn't helpful.
Oh, okay.
No. I just always wonder about bipolar because I see it misdiagnosed so often. I am so curious about like how that was diagnosed to be like passed down, but that's total sidebar what will open. But what I will say, one of the things you were talking about, now I lost it.
Um,
What was the second part after the
like,
ADHD? Oh, the spectrum and the disease.
oh,
So, two things. So, I wonder your thoughts on this idea of presenting ADHD as a spectrum.
okay.
My thoughts are I don't love that because we did that with autism and I don't think that it helped.
Interesting.
And then the disease model, I'm curious how you think about that because I come from an addictions background and I find that the disease model is not helpful at all.
No kidding. Okay, so I know a little bit about addiction. Not I don't feel like I know enough. I don't think I ever will. And so honestly, I will start asking other people like, do you think it's a disease? Do you think it's something else?
No. I whether or not I think it's like a heritable disease or not, I think that the model of thinking about that, especially when you think about treatment, is not helpful because I think that it absolves too much of the responsibility and it becomes this thing that can't be controlled. And so while maybe there is a disease marker to it, there is also a lot of accountability, a lot of awareness. Like you can't, this thing just doesn't happen to you. Like that's not the only piece to that. And I find that that can be really not helpful in maintaining progress in treatment or to manage relapse. Like the idea of relapse, I always tell people like plan for it. It is whether it happens or not, you need a plan. And I think that sometimes that can be hard. It can align with the disease model in the sense of like this could just happen again, right? Because it's a disease, it could come up, it could flare up. But you also, it can't just be, you have to do some stuff to be prepared for a relapse, to know when a relapse is coming, rather than kind of this absolution. That's not the right word.
Solution?
But love like the responsibility of it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you're pointing out that like there are practicalities in terms of, treatment and like which viewpoint will serve
Yeah,
a person in a place and time.
agreed.
Like at an extreme, I know there are people who believe that like we are living in a simulation, right? Or
We could be Truman Show for real.
we could be, there are people who say that free will is an illusion, that we don't have it.
I can sometimes agree with that, yeah.
And then there's a lot of people will then sort of take the next step is to say, well, if you believe that, what sort of good does that do for you? And would it be better for your life to not sort of act as if that's the case? Even if that is the case, would it be better to act as if that's not the case?
Yep.
So there is like an element of practicality. To your question about the spectrum thing, I think that I wouldn't. Oh, I don't know. This is what's tough about it is when I'm in. This happens all the time. Like I'm in the role of evaluator,
Mm-hmm.
and what I want to do is show a person sort of the complexity of their psychology. Like, I want to tell them about their relationship to, task demands, their relationship to themselves. Do they see themselves as worthy? Or their relationship to other people? How are they, with the other people in their life? Or, I want to talk to them about these kinds of patterns and these intricacies and how they all relate. And then sometimes it can feel like, okay, that's all great, doc, but do I have ADHD or not? Yes or no? And I this article, I know people are really mad, but I've been in the role of having to sort of say yes or no so many times when it's not clear cut. And it sometimes doesn't seem like the right question to be asking. Maybe a better question would be sort of like, if you are the way you are, how can you best manage in the world? And so the idea that people are complicated, that you sort of are the way you are in a way. And I don't mean to be kind of fatalistic about that and not have growth mindset. I just want, like, we all have sort of our personalities, our tendencies. We're all kind of, up until this point, we're all kind of wired a certain way. And so if we can come to terms with ourselves as people, like as people that we are, then what do you do next? And sometimes it's just not at all clear, that this would fit the box of ADHD or not. And so when they brought up in the article that these things, like the symptoms will ebb and flow over the course of a life, they will have, for some people, more severity, more impairment, and for other people much less. To me, that sort of idea of spectrum, I guess, makes sense. I think of it as like, if you conceptualize it as a spectrum, that seems to help. But do I want the disorder rewritten to be called like attention
deficit spectrum?
Well, none of these names have ever been good. Oh my God, remember those old-timey names? Like, what was it? Brain dysfunction something? I can't think of it now.
They were not nice. But again, at the time, that was what was accepted, and then it grows, and you have to... Anyway. Yeah, no, I think that there would be a similar thing where at the end of the day, people still want to know like a yes or no answer. And I think for us as clinicians, it's helpful to think about it on a spectrum. I think we already are, but how is that going to help our clients? And what do they, I don't know. That's where I think I don't know that the idea of autism spectrum has helped people. I think most people I've talked to have been further confused by it, where it's like, wait, so, I mean, so many times where like, even simply, it's like, well, this might have been classified as Asperger's 10 years ago, or something like that. That helps to click, but it's, I don't know. I think when we cast something to the net too wide, I think it loses its helpfulness. And I think there is a lot of times that when I would evaluate people, I would ask the question of, okay, so what happens if you get this diagnosis? What happens if you don't? What do you want from this? What do you hope for? And a lot of times people hadn't thought that far, where it was just like, oh, well, I don't know, or sometimes they had a clear idea. Sometimes they, I would, have a plan. I want to get on medication, or it would be validating, or any number of things. But I do find that beyond the do you have it or you not question was like a little bit of a unknown space for a lot of people.
I wish there was a way to like officially validate people's experience.
And that's so hard.
But not necessarily with this diagnostic label if they don't meet criteria for it.
I know. Yes.
Isn't that where, we kind of feel weird because we go into it, I want to help people. And if the answer is you don't meet criteria, I'm not trying to say, okay, so there's nothing there.
Yes.
Bye.
Yes.
Like, I've had people express that concern to me on the phone before we start. Like, well, if you tell me that I don't have it and they'll usually say, and there's nothing wrong with me, or, and there's nothing you can do, or whatever. And it's like, whoa, that's not what saying you don't meet criteria means. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing you can do. I
Mm-hmm.
still would hesitate with the something being wrong with you.
Yeah.
Going back to that question about practicalities and like what outlook is the most helpful, when we are in the role of therapist, trying to like get sort of behavior change, help people grow and develop and like move forward in their lives, starting from the position of there's something wrong with you is a very unhelpful position.
Mm-hmm.
I usually try to set the scene with like, there is nothing wrong with you. You already have everything you need to succeed. We just need to find what's going to work for you. We
Mm-hmm.
need to like unlock some potential.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's therapeutic.
Yep.
And so even if I say, no, you don't meet criteria, I'm still not saying there's something wrong with you. But I
Right.
can still validate that, like, you're calling me for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that that's not there. It's just that a different lens through which to find a different perspective on where you're struggling,
Yep.
I think could help people move forward. Like that's ultimately what I want.
And isn't it so funny how we're like, as a psychology field, we love the black and white, but all we do in therapy is talk about how to not do that? Especially from our lens of the acceptance and commitment therapy kind of framework. And it's like, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
We gotta practice what we preach here, folks.
I mean,
and it's so important to acknowledge how hard that is. Like, I get when I tell my clients about that, I'm like, this is difficult. Like, there is a reason why you want to go back to the black and white. You have to stay here. And it's hard to do in practice. But at the end of the day, it is really important. Yeah, I don't know. I think it does bring up the question, though, of like, there is such a desire for that simplistic, do I have it or do I not kind of thing that we've seen come up. And I don't know, it still perplexes me so much. It's like, why is that coming up?
I mean, I think there are generational components of this.
Sure.
And it depends how online you are.
Mm-hmm.
So if this is seen as an entry point to community,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
then I think it's completely rational. It's a rational thing to say, I want to be part of a community. I see myself as part of it. I recognize myself in this community, and I would like to gain entry to that.
Yeah. Yep.
In many ways, then it is a little bit, I feel like I'm on a different, like we're at cross, we're not on the same highway.
Right. Yep.
How do I explain? Like, my hands are going like apart from each other. Jeez.
But it's funny, right? Because I think there's this piece of like, what this article says, what we kind of believe is that there's an individualistic piece to that. Like, everybody's experience is going to be a little bit different, but yet there is this desire for community, and that there's these sameness, there's these things that match, right? And so it's at odds, right, with what we're gonna say is like, embrace this individual piece and try to work with it, versus like, I want to belong. And I think, again, we know those to be very human traits, right? Mm-hmm. The black and the white is something that we've known for years about humans. It comes up in a lot. The need for socialization and community and belonging is key and central, So I think that there is this piece where we're encouraging people in a therapeutic setting to do the opposite of what comes naturally, even though it is to your benefit, like it is.
Which thing is not coming naturally?
Like, it's not coming natural to live in the gray. It's not coming natural to own your individual. And people do that. I think we are, especially in the U.S., much more individualistic. But I think there's that piece where we're trying to encourage those things that are hard. We're always going to have to work for that.
No, I completely agree with you on the, finding the gray area. I think that is often a therapeutic task.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it
Yeah.
takes effort.
Yeah. And like wanting to be part of a community. I mean, I like when, if that's the main reason for coming to me, sometimes I try to take myself out of it. I'm like, just then go be part of it.
Yeah,
You know,
for
if you see
sure.
yourself, like, if you see other people and you're saying, like, oh, they're quirky and they're, you know, kind of countercultural or non-traditional, and I feel like that inside, then just go be part of that.
Yeah.
I'm also quirky and non-traditional or whatever. You know, like there's no police.
No.
You know, but if you're coming to me, I'm on the track of like I'm assigning a diagnosis.
Right.
Like you're asking me to evaluate you according to like the psychiatric diagnostic manual. And if that's not ultimately what we need to be doing, then let's not.
Yep. For sure.
You know, and I think you and I, like, we have always been, this has always been tricky because diagnoses are not all, they don't all function the same way. You know, if somebody says you have a depressive disorder or anxiety disorder, it's usually because you're saying, I'm really like this is upsetting and I would like it to get better. And so we kind of assign those labels, especially as therapists, while we're working with somebody. Hey, can we get you out of this depression? Can we get the anxiety to go down a little bit, get you a little bit more out there so that it doesn't feel like anxiety is ruining your life, you know, constricting your life. It doesn't feel like you can't get out of bed anymore. So we sort of, I think of it as like, we should be assigning it as kind of a working diagnosis for the thing that is guiding the therapy.
Yeah.
And
it's
then
like the diagnosis is the marker, and then those give us treatment plan objectives. Like, okay, depression is the diagnosis, so we need to get you out of bed. We need to reduce, you know, like point out those things out.
Exactly. And then hopefully the treatment works.
Yep.
Another episode for us. Like, how long should you be in therapy? Therapy should work. It should do something.
Yep.
There's tons of research on that. And then hopefully you're not depressed anymore. And we say, okay, you know, great progress. You did some excellent work. Go live your life.
Yep.
Call me if you need me. Whereas when we're asked to evaluate ADHD, in many ways, we know that people are going to treat it as a permanent diagnosis.
Yes.
And and their friends and family may treat it as a permanent diagnosis. And this article is suggesting that there is good reason to think that this is going to ebb and flow, that this could sort of come out in some environments where it's going to quiet down in others. And it may not be useful to think of this as being a permanent way that you are always going to be different.
Because I think it counts you out of ways in which you can shine. You know, like if you always think, oh, well, that's my ADHD brain, it's never going to work. It's, oof. There's a lot of ways in which that doesn't work versus, hey, you know, this could come up here, it could come up here. This is actually the first article highlighting some research that helps me believe in the hyperfocus symptom that people have cited a lot, that I have been scratching my head. I'm like, wait, is hyperfocus a thing? Like, is it not? Like, this is the first thing that kind of put together of like, oh, okay, maybe in some contexts they might struggle, others they won't. But it also was highlighting the medication and the role that plays. I loved how they talked about the relationship that we have had with amphetamines and the way that we have used it throughout time. It's like, oh, sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. But like this idea that it can take a mundane task and make it tolerable or enjoyable was like, okay. So yeah, like there are some tasks that are just gonna be mundane, and maybe it means you have ADHD and it's that ebb and flow, or maybe it means you don't, and there are just tasks that are going to be really, really hard to get through.
Well, right. I mean, it was talking about the role of motivation.
Yes.
You know, and now now we're talking about dopamine as being the neurotransmitter involved in drive, motivation, going after something. It's not actually about pleasure. It's actually about the drive to get something. And so, if I mean, I think we already kind of know this, that like people are different in terms of that drive. And the way I think of hyperfocus as being is like a flow state, which there's tons of research on that too. Like flow is actually a normal part of human behavior, but maybe if you're accustomed to having kind of a lower feeling of motivation with tasks that aren't super interesting, then, because a lot of people will say, and then I hyper focused on this thing that interested me. And maybe what they're noticing is like this contrast where they had the combination of I'm interested in it and I can go after it right now. And that just feels so good.
It does, for sure.
Yeah. And maybe if what we're saying is, okay, this is a subset of people who have a hard time driving towards something when, it's not particularly interesting. They have a harder time kind of overcoming that like inertia. We all have resistance to tasks. I mean, that's the definition of a task that you don't like, is that you have resistance to it. Like that's these things are sort of circular sometimes, like boring tasks. What is a boring task? A thing you don't really want to do.
Yep.
So to say a symptom is like not wanting to do boring tasks is circular.
Oh, for sure. Well, and boring is different to different people. Like in high school, I thought the idea of like English classes were the worst for me because which is very strange because now I love to read, but the idea of like sitting down and reading all the time, and especially for a book I had to read but wasn't interested in.
Oh, really? I didn't know this about you.
The worst. I was much better at that time at like math or science because there was something that was like solving a puzzle, or it was like I could put this effort into solving this and it got to the end of it, versus like, no, you just have to read this book. It's not interesting, but you need to read it for the class. And I was like, oh.
That's fascinating, because this didn't bother me so much. Like I was able, if I started reading, to usually kind of find a hook and like keep going. Like maybe I didn't know what it was about, but if I got started, it was like, oh yeah, okay, I'm not like, let's find out more about what happens here. And I think I read more than my classmates would, even though I didn't finish a lot of things in English because I wasn't a very fast reader.
Yeah, I wasn't a fast reader either.
But I would progress further into the story than where my classmates gave up, because there was something about it that would hook me in. But by contrast, now I'm like reading some of these science literature things. Science was my nemesis.
Really?
Oh my God. It didn't make sense. I couldn't figure out how to tackle it. I was scared. I didn't understand why this made sense to other people.
Yep.
Especially once you got down into stuff that you couldn't see, wasn't like tangible.
Physics.
or chemistry was
awful. I hated chemistry.
I still struggle with like, okay, and it's just really teeny tiny, and there's this electron, it's circling the nuke, and I'm like, okay, if you tell me that's all there, that's there, but it's really hard for me to work with it because I can't directly contact that.
Oh God. Yeah, no, I agree. But I think this is a great example of like how things shift, and like what just kind of being able to, I don't know, I guess tolerate some of that. And I think that it is hard for students. I was thinking about it when I was reading the article about how, especially like in high school or, any kind of thing before college, I think before you're really allowed to choose what you want to study, that of course there's going to be a lot of ADHD stuff that comes up, because some kids are going to find this stuff really interesting. Some kids are going to find it boring, but also the setup, like even kindergarten these days it involves like more seat work, less play, like stuff that just is not developmentally conducive. And of course there's going to be kids that are struggling with that. And I think it's hard because there's just this pressure to fit it all in and to do all these things. And then naturally, when people don't fit the mold, it's then labeled as a disorder. And to be fair, that's part of the definition. If it's disrupting your life, then like, okay, we want to take a look at that. But holy cow, like context, it matters.
It really does. I know a lot has been written and said about this, but, school, like in school now, requiring too much sitting and
Mm-hmm.
focusing time, and then like basically pathologizing any kid who doesn't sit at a desk and pay attention to the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Um, not enough outdoor time, cuts to like recess, kids not being able to play independently with other kids, always having an adult kind of directing the play. A lot has been written about all of these things. I will say, I'm saying this out loud, and I don't know who's listening, and if you are a parent and your child has been diagnosed and you're saying, "No, but my kid really is different." I hear that.
For
I
sure.
I
Yes.
I think that there is a subset of kids who do struggle more than most.
Yes, for
And
sure.
that comes up all over this article, is like these researchers come back to the idea of like, we're not trying to say that this doesn't exist.
And
And
that
the
was the number one criticism I saw amongst our peers is they're saying this doesn't exist. I'm like,
what?
did you read the same article? Like, he
They
never says that.
they don't say that. If anything, they're saying this is a thing that for, 35 plus years, well, and maybe like 100 years, we've felt that it was useful to create a label and a category of kids who are outside of the norm.
Yep.
Kids who are not developing like these executive functions at the same rate as their peers,
Yep.
whose behavior looks divergent from their peers.
Yep.
And so it's really just a matter of where do you draw the line between typical and atypical.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you are listening and your child has been diagnosed, do not hear me saying, "Oh, well, there's no way that could possibly be true," or, it's just that school is bad or something. It's just that, I mean, they pointed out that we're getting to the point where it was something like more than 20% of a group, like later adolescent boys, are being called atypical
Mm-hmm.
when it's this huge chunk
Yes.
of boys that age.
Yes.
That is where we're saying the problem is. Not that
Yes.
some boys aren't atypical. It's
Yes.
just that we don't define atypical as being something that a lot of people do.
Right. Right. If it becomes something that a lot of people do, it is no longer atypical.
By definition.
Right. Yes. And I think that we hope that when we're talking about these topics, especially ADHD, like we did with our last one, is when we talked about, well, what else could it be, is to not to say, well, it's not this, it's this. It's just to equip you with some more details that if it feels like it doesn't quite fit, or if you're saying, well, I see this, but what about this, that there's all these contextual factors, there's all these nuances to it, that you might find an answer that fits a little bit more with some of the stuff that we're talking about, if you're considering that. And then there is absolutely the subset that it is atypical, this disorder fits as a diagnosis, like it is real. And there's also lots and lots of other ways to conceptualize this, to understand it, to know that there is a lot of gray in this area. So I think that, just similar to the article, we're presenting some different ideas to think about, some different ways to think about that. We're asking some questions, hoping you guys can think a little bit more about this, or if there's other things that resonate, that it's there. So
have you seen any response from like parents or anything?
That's, to be fair, I haven't. I mean, the reactions I'm seeing are from other psychologists and therapists and things like that. So I would be curious to hear what parents think about this, or just other groups.
Yeah, I would be curious too. Yeah, they were so clear that they were not denying the existence of this. And several of the researchers were like, I would never want people who need help to go without it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is in their duty as scientists to be asking, if people need help, what is the help that will get them the furthest?
Yep.
And it shouldn't be a problem to look closely at the treatments to see if they're really doing what we say they're doing.
And you have to check in. I think that's a lot of what this article was reminding people of just like, you have to check in. You have to check your work. Is this still working? This is what worked 10 years ago. Is it still working today? Pay attention to what you see coming through your office. I saw a lot of people being split a little, like at first saying like, oh, well, this is not overdiagnosed, like the article says, and then also saying like, it happens a lot more than you think in the same sentence, where I was just like, wait a second. Like, are we upset that we're suggesting it's overdiagnosed, or are we suggesting it's underdiagnosed? And I think that, what was my point? I don't know.
That's all right.
Dang it.
That's okay.
Why was I going there? I don't know. I'll come back to it.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think people should take away that.
Oh, I remember now. I think that, so I've noticed there's this reaction, right, of kind of being upset at the article saying it's overdiagnosed, but then also kind of reminding like, hey, it happens a lot more than you think.
You mean diagnosis happens a lot more than you think?
Yeah.
Or the disorder occurring
The
more
disorder
often?
occurring.
Okay.
And it's like underdiagnosed versus overdiagnosed. And I think that it's kind of paying attention to practice, right? Like, part of the reason this stuff comes up, and I can attest to that, I see this disorder in the past 5 to 10 years skyrocketing in questions. Like, that's the number one referral question, or it's just, it's around me. It's around my social media. It's in talks at the dinner table. It's everywhere. And so I think to say like, no, we know everything to know about ADHD and we don't have to check in. It's like, no, we have to. Like, this is clearly something that's showing up, and we want to just be curious about it and look and see, like, what does this do? And it's okay to ask questions about things we thought we knew ironclad.
Yes. I thought this article was a good kind of level set. Here's what we know and here's what we don't know.
And here's what we're noticing, and what do we know about that?
What do the trends say? All of that. I think that there's nothing wrong with taking kind of a current snapshot of what is known and what's not known.
Yes.
You know, and if we're walking around saying we know exactly what this is and how to treat it, I don't think that reflects the current state of the research, but I thought some of the research in there was fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So why can't we
have to evolve?
Why can't we look at it?
And part of evolution is looking at what isn't working. You know, like, okay, that worked really well then. Is it still working today? It's a check and balance. It's something that we always have to do. And of course, it's a little gut-wrenching sometimes when people poke at something that you thought you knew ironclad, and then they present a different idea, and that's okay. So.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I can definitely empathize with, like, if you really feel like you totally get it, it sucks to have it be, like, poked and prodded.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I can understand not wanting somebody outside of the field to do that.
Oh, sure.
Investigation. But I don't know. I also think that removes some of the, like, professional
bias.
I mean, yeah, bias. Like, weird to kind of like, not enmeshed, but I mean, we're too, like, invested.
Yes.
You know, professionally, and in terms of our, like, you know, our egos and our degrees, and like,
but
we're too close to it sometimes. And there's fantastic professionals cited in the article who are doing that.
Yes.
And then it just takes, you know, this one person to kind of aggregate it all for a popular press.
Yes.
For a lay audience.
Yes.
I don't see anything wrong with that.
No, I thought it was great. And that's like the same reason why, like, your therapist cannot also be your best friend. You know, your best friend is not going to be your therapist because we're too close to the sun. Like, you need the outside opinion.
Yeah.
Well, should we call it on this one? And wrap up for today. So those are our thoughts on it. We hope that you guys enjoyed our takes on it. If you didn't enjoy our takes on it, that's okay too. But yeah, we couldn't stop thinking about it. We felt like we had to talk about it. And yeah, we just wanted to put some other opinions out there. Hopefully you found this helpful or interesting, or if you didn't, that's okay too. So tune in next time. We'll talk about another topic, giving you our opinions.
Thanks.
Talk soon.
This podcast is for informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for treatment of any kind.